Welcome to the Indie Pub, a laid-back interview show dedicated to the world of self and indie publishing. I'm your host, Jay Rushing, author of the self-published fantasy noir novel Radio, and a beverage buff with a passion for deep dives and good times. Each episode, a guest will step into the pub with a publishing-related topic and a favorite drink for us to explore and enjoy. Whether you want to sharpen your craft, snag a new cocktail recipe, or just have a laugh, there's always a seat and a full glass waiting for you at the Indie Pub. Welcome to the Indie Pub. Today's guest is Tendayi O Chirawu, author of the Glitter Horn and Narinhi, The Man of the Lie. She's also the editor of Through Walls, Stories About Welcoming the Stranger, the president of the writing group for the American Church in Paris, and host of Right to Write on World Radio Paris. She's here with us to talk about managing the process of publishing a book yourself, from idea to reality. But before we dive in, tell us a bit about what we're drinking in the pub today.
What we're drinking in the pub is actually a green smoothie of mine. And I don't know if I should get into all the ingredients. I guess I can. So it's like made of 1 apple, 3 carrots, 2.5 celery sticks, 2 blocks of spinach, and some water.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
So I am a third cultured person, and so a lot of my work kind of revolves around being a global citizen, identity, and I guess the general kind of life themes and tropes and how all those things are kind of interconnected. And I mentioned that I'm third cultured. One of my parents is from Zambia, the other parent is from Zimbabwe, but I never lived there. I grew up in Namibia, and one of my parents grew up in the States, and the other one lived there for like 20 years, and that's where they got married. And so I kind of also had this kind of big American influence in our home. My parents, not being from the same country, spoke English as our first language, so that's my first language. But I mean, I also speak my mother tongue, which is Luvale. I speak my father tongue, which is Shona. I speak the languages of Namibia where I grew up, which are a bit of a Chirawu, Afrikaans, some German, because I went to a German high school. And so those are kind of a lot of the things that I look at in my work and in my writing. And then also, again, living in France, I speak French as well because I live in France. And France, Paris, is famously known for being a melting pot of cultures. So that's kind of like what my work focuses on and touches on. And if you read anything I've written, it's, you see it and you feel it. That's a bit about my work. Outside of like my professional work, professionally, I did a master's in global communication and civil society, and I worked a bit in advertising, and then in the NGO world for a little bit, always in communication. And the thing I continue to do is digital content, online mainly. I mean, also the online part is like, well, everybody's online now since the pandemic, but yeah. Yeah. So that is what I do, my work.
Nice. All right. So when it comes to self-publishing, there are a lot of strategies and methods and steps that people take on their journey towards publication. Can you give us a bit of an overview of what that process looks like for you?
Okay. So I did 2 different processes. So for my first book, Narinhi, I enlisted sort of publishing services from a publishing house. And so I basically paid them to kind of do all of the publishing and make it available and everything for me. So there was very little that I personally had to do after having written the book. They handled everything with regards to like the layout, the cover, distribution. The only thing where I had to kind of come back was to give my okay on like the galley and the cover and pricing and things like that. But basically, it was just all handled by them. That was my first book. And it worked out well, but I didn't sort of like the lack of, like after it's published, there's very little sort of control that you have over the work itself. And so for the Glitter Horn, I really wanted to kind of keep that control. So I spent a lot of time talking with a lot of other writers, some of them published by big houses, and most of those writers who I spoke to, so I belong to a pod group, if any of you know what that is. So we are a group of writers on WhatsApp, and we're a pod, and we kind of just like swap ideas, and we support each other in various different ways. And so I spoke to some of the writers in our pod who were published by big name publishers, and they got published because they had self-published before, and then they gained traction that way, and then they were picked up by big name publishers. And so I spoke to them about their processes. And I got a lot of information on like resources that I could use, because I have a lot of skills, but because the publishing process involves so many different phases, which require you to wear very different hats, I needed to get some information on the hats which I don't have any sort of experience or knowledge on. And so that's what I did for, I think, the most of last year, because the book was finished in January. And I have an editor in the States who I'd worked with before for Narinhi. And so she edited it for me. And then when I got the edited book back, I went over it myself again, and then sort of really dived into that. Okay, how do I take this from being just my now edited manuscript into being like a paperback and an ebook? Yeah, so this one was really very much like I was the publisher. I was doing the distribution. I found somebody like a graphic designer to do the cover for me. But even the final cover, I changed myself. So I had to learn a bit of like InDesign to be able to, I took an InDesign course to be able to
Nice.
do that. So yeah, it was a real learning curve in many ways, but I really did like the process, and I liked the control that doing it yourself gave me. And I also liked kind of being able to understand all the different moving parts of the publishing machine.
Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper with your second book's process. Let's dive a little deeper into kind of the big phases. So let's start right at the beginning during that initial writing phase. What did your process look like while you were basically building the book itself?
I've never been one of those writers who's like, every day I write an hour. I kind of did it in very big chunks over short periods of time. I'd say there were 4 big chunks over short periods of time. And the thing that helped me, I knew that I had this idea that I wanted to write about this woman of color who lives between Europe and Southern Africa, and who's struggling with sort of being in a country where she doesn't have any family, and she's a mother, but she's also married to this narcissistic, awful person, and she doesn't have a lot of agency, and she's kind of in a very vulnerable situation, and she's trying to figure out how to get out of that. And I knew it was a story I wanted to write because I had spoken to a lot of women and expat women, and I, surprised to find that a lot of women actually are in that situation of like being trapped essentially. So I knew it was something I wanted to write about because of how universal the experience seemed to be. And so I wrote most of it just before we had the first big wave of the pandemic. I had written, I'd say, a third of it just before then. And the thing that really helped me kind of to push to get was the writers group, because like every time we have writers group, you've got to bring chapters in to be workshopped. And so, so that helped me do like a really big chunk of it. But I kind of knew very start to finish where I wanted the story to go. The middle part was sort of unknown to me, but I knew like how I wanted it to end. And starting it was quite easy. And I think this is the first book I've ever written like that, because My other books, I kind of have an idea, and then I start writing, and I kind of let the idea flesh itself out. I just let the story take me where the story is going to take me. But this is the first book I ever wrote, which I really knew, like, this is the message I want the story to have, and this is where we're going. So that's how that got done.
Nice. Okay, so then let's jump ahead a little bit and look at the editing phase. So as you're inching towards publication, now you've got this book. It's been birthed. It exists in the world. So what did that next step look like?
So the next step was contacting my editor, Sarah Richmond. She is wonderful. And, letting her know that I had this manuscript. And she sent it back to me in 4 parts, also the same way that I had written it. And then after she'd sent it back to me, I kind of went through all of her notes and back and forth with her a bit about some things. And then I kind of felt like, okay, it's perfect. I have it. So let me do something about it. And then I printed sort of it's like a proof copy is what they call it. So I had one. So I got one of these so I could see how thick it was. And, you go through the dimensions when you're putting the book together. You kind of see how big you want it to be, but you don't really have a sense of how big it'll actually be in terms of like width and stuff until you actually have it. So I got one of these and I was like, it is perfect. Let me just read my perfection one last time. And then I read my perfection one last time. And these are all, I don't know if you can see this clearly, but like, oh yeah, these are all the things that I was like, but I thought it was perfect. Yep. And then I just found that like, I went and I bought like these little Post-it things and just like would tape every time I was reading. I found an instance of an error or a typo or something with the spacing, I'd tape one of those in. And so as you can see, it was like, wow, we are so far from being ready to put this in anyone's hands. So then I went back and, made all those changes and then did another round of these proof copies. And the other round of the proof copies has considerably less of those, but it still has enough for me. Like, nope, we have to go back in there and like, really sharpen that out. And so, yeah, I did that 3 times before it was like, now you are safe. And then I had beta readers. I had 3 beta readers read it for me, just to be sure that now it was, without blemish. And so then after having done that, I went back. I used a tool called Reedsy. And it's in the Reedsy tool because I found Kindle Direct Publishing from Amazon. Like, it's really great and it's really useful, but there's a lot of, I think, refinement that they could do in terms of layouting. When you drop the manuscript in there and there's like things wrong with it, it's really difficult to adjust. And the same thing with the cover, actually. So I did the layout in Reedsy because that was just so much easier. Very easy to edit and directly in the text. And you can download 2 different versions of the manuscript for an ebook, one and the other one specifically for paperback. Yeah. So that's what I used for the layout. And then for the cover, I used... it's called book cover, actually. I did a trial run with InDesign, and in InDesign, you download another application called Hurry Cover, and you put the Hurry Cover inside InDesign, and then you build your cover inside there. But at that point, I didn't have a whole lot of practice with InDesign. So it was easier for me to use the book cover to draw the image that the graphic designer, whose name is Malik Figueroa, by the way. He's based in New York. He created a great cover for me, and then I just dropped that into the book cover and like was able to modify like the dimensions without it like altering the quality of the image, and have it fit perfectly in the layout for the the actual book for Amazon. And so then I put those two separate elements inside Amazon, and then did another like print run of it, and that worked out really well, actually. And that's how I did it. But like, I would strongly recommend, I mean, unless you have the time and the skills and probably more expertise in doing it all in one place, I found that you get, what for me, I got a better product when I did everything in separate places and then assembled the book together. Like I put the different elements together in the final place. So I did it in Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, but I also did it in Ingram Spark, because Ingram Spark enables your book to be available in other book selling places like Barnes and Noble. In France, it's Fnac. I don't know if there's a Fnac in the States, but like, yeah, it's available in other places and not just Amazon. Once you put it in Ingram Spark, and so that's kind of that was the whole process of doing it. But it did require a lot of the final image that I got from Malik was great, but I wanted to add something, one more element to it. I added was the glitter, which the original image didn't have, and that's an element that I got from Canva. So I took his image, I put the glitter on from Canva, and then when I put it back into book cover, then I added the title and the information on the spine, and then the blurb at the back. But it's really intuitive because it also shows you where the ISBN sort of box is going to be.
Yeah.
So you can kind of, for placement purposes, you can kind of see like, if I have the text here, if I have my photo here, if I have, this is where everything is going to go, and here's how it's going to look, which I found to be very, very, very useful. And I hadn't seen that sort of in other tools that I tried. So, yeah.
Now with your distribution, so you've got Amazon and Ingram Spark. I do the same thing with my book. Are you doing paperback and ebooks through both of them, or are you doing the Kindle and paperback on Amazon and just paperback, or just ebook through Ingram Spark?
I do both on both
Gotcha.
platforms. Initially, I didn't have ebook on Ingram Spark, but I found that a lot of younger people prefer to read the ebook, and so, but also a lot of people do not want to purchase from Amazon. So then I made the ebook available on Ingram Spark as well.
Nice. Okay, so you've made it to launch day. Do you have any specific ways that you celebrate? So I know for me, at the end of a big draft, when I'm done with a kind of a full draft run, or when I've finally published or whatever, it's some sort of fancy whiskey. Do you have some sort of ritual or celebration that you always do for your publications?
Ooh, I'm the worst. I like to go shopping.
Nice.
So like, I'm like one of those people who'll be like, any excuse to celebrate so I can go shopping. So, when I was finally done with it, I did go out and buy myself a nice blazer and just be like, okay, like this is a big thing. We've finally gotten to a final finished product, and so this is. I told myself it's gonna be the blazer that I wear on my blog tour, or if I do like little speaking events. So that's what I did.
That sounds great. Okay, let's jump back to our drink for today. So every episode, we always talk about taste and smell because they're the most overlooked senses in writing. So when you enjoy this nice green smoothie, what is it you're picking up? What are those tastes that come through? What sort of sensations are you getting? What sort of smells are you getting?
The celery kind of has an overpowering taste, which is why I add the apple to kind of neutralize that a little bit and add a bit of sugariness to it. I don't even smell the carrots. I usually mainly smell the spinach and the celery. Yeah. And the color also, mine today is a bit more orangey than it. Usually it's very green, but I guess my celery wasn't as strong as it usually is. But yeah. So the texture is, I think, dependent on two things, which is how long you leave it in the blender for, and water you put in it. So I like mine. I like mine a little bit more watery, just because I then put it in a big bottle, which I keep in the fridge, and then every day I pour a glass out for myself until it's done. And also because to put it in the bottle, I have like a funnel, which I pour out of the blend, which I pour the mixture out of the blender. So like the liquid has to fit through the funnel. And no matter how long I blend it for, I always end up with like one or two like chunks of carrot that that the blades of the blender could not get. But yeah, even when it's watery, it's still quite thick. Even when it's watery, it's still quite thick. You can see here, I've still got big chunks of like carrot froth, like kind of pasted up beside the glass. And it's something I enjoy. I kind of enjoy the granularly taste or feel on my tongue, along with the liquid. So I hope I'm selling it.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how well the various ingredients kind of took care of the negative notes of the other ingredients. So like the bitterness of the spinach or the celery, the apple and the carrot really take that away, and the spinach really mellows out the sourness of the apple, and it all just kind of like it leaves all the good parts of the various flavors and then gets rid of all of the harsher aspects. It's really surprising.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. I never actually taste the spinach. I kind of always feel like the spinach is there for color.
Yeah. It kind of gives it a little bit of like that, what is it, like a wheatgrass kind of smell.
Yeah, I actually was leaning kind of towards, like I said, when I lived in India, there was a drink that they'd make for us like every day from lemongrass. And, I always tried to kind of replicate that a little bit, and I, have never been able to, but I kind of was, trying to do a bit of that with the spinach, with this drink.
Yeah, lemongrass I love the flavor of lemongrass. I've tried to grow it 3 times now to absolutely disastrous results, but it's so good. Someday I'll figure it out, but
yeah.
All right, so let's jump back into our topic. When you started writing, especially the second book for the second book's process, did you have a plan for publishing ready to go when you started, or is it something that you developed as you during the writing process?
It's something that I quasi developed before. I spoke with somebody who has a small publishing house, like independent publisher. And she kind of talked to me about like organization. I think she spoke a lot more about like the administrative side and organization, and a lot also about the marketing aspect of it. And I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to the marketing aspect of it because I was kind of like, well, that's at the end. So like, I'll devote more brain power to that when we're closer to that. But a lot of it was a lot of sort of like putting yourself on a schedule for the different phases of the publishing. And so I kind of tried to imagine how many phases I would need specifically for my book. Because I feel like, I guess every book is different, slightly different in that regard. And so, yeah, I kind of had an idea, but I hadn't really committed to it. I hadn't fully fleshed it out until I was now sitting with the fully edited manuscript. But like I said, I knew that I would have to consider distribution channels, and I had done a bit of research into that. I knew about the cover, I think really was the biggest challenge, because I like I said, I didn't have any of those skills, and I had to use different tools and also enlist like a graphic designer to do that part of the work for me. But yeah, having sort of that skeletal infrastructure for it in my mind, kind of floating around in my mind constantly, I think really did help me sort of as I was getting closer to the end, and then when I was actually now having to do it.
Do you think that the process that you came up with is generally a pretty universal strategy that other people can follow, or do you think that it ended up pretty specific to you in your own circumstances?
I think there are some aspects of it which are pretty general. I mean, the editing, obviously, indispensable. I think the main sort of basic things are pretty general, but then some of the things which were specific to me, like I didn't have a very specific launch date. I had, it'll be done around about October-ish at some point. And because I wasn't very specific on that date, I didn't do a big launch either online or physically. I kind of, did my rollout slowly after testing the waters for like maybe 3 weeks after it was, live in available places. I was still kind of testing the waters to see before I actually did like a blog tour. So I think in that way it was very specific to me, because I know like a lot of people, like once it's done, they have launch day where they're at a library or like at a venue anyway, and there's people invited and they, have their big sort of birthday for their book. I didn't really do that, just because of the things that I've mentioned. Yeah.
So navigating the publishing process can be pretty daunting for self-publishers. I know it was for me. Can you recommend specific resources that really helped you in both developing the process and getting the work done? Like I know you mentioned Reedsy, but are there other resources that just really stood out as helpful for you?
Yeah, I mentioned Reedsy. That was really helpful. And the reason that I mentioned that is because when we published the anthology through all, had a huge problem with the layout. The layout was perfect, but whenever we dropped it into KDP, it sentences were incomplete, and then they had like these little hyphens, and we didn't know why, and support wasn't very supportive. So for the layout, Reedsy was really, for me, like hassle-free, user-friendly. Support was very responsive. The other tool I mentioned also because it simplifies the book cover process was book cover. I have the InDesign and hurry cover in InDesign, but I really feel like book cover was so much easier to use and change if you needed to make changes. And also, not only to make changes, it's also very specific. Like you can make very specific things specific to your book. So like, for example, the color of my name and the color of the title of the book. I was able to go in book cover and actually choose the color codes myself and, put shading where I wanted for the different kinds of, I was like really able to do a whole lot of that kind of stuff very easily without being like an expert, which I really found to be very good for the cover. And then also the spine, being able to kind of just like fit everything I needed to on the spine without and manipulate the text so that it reads as it should on the spine easily, again, because the tools are like quite intuitive. I found that to be like a really, really good tool for that. But I think my biggest resource was talking to the other writers, I think, because they had gone through the process and they had like tips and ideas and suggestions. And I think that was really what my biggest resource was. Whenever I got stuck and I kind of didn't know something, people had gone the route before me were able to help. Yeah.
Now, with book cover, is that an online resource, like a website, or is that something that you would download to your computer?
No, you don't have to download it to your computer. It's you create your login, and then you log in and you build your project, and then you can save it inside there so that if you need to come back and make changes, you can do that. But then you can also download it in different formats for your, for whatever purposes that you need, either for the ebook or for the paperback or the hardcover.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that sounds really slick. I like that. Yeah. Just log in and go. That those are the types of tools I really like to use.
Yeah. And also it you can set it so that it remembers your, because I'm terrible with passwords. So I just I just got it just set so that it remembers my password, and so now I just type it in and it's like, welcome back.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, so let's pop back to our delicious drink one more time. So each episode, I also like to ask our guests if they're willing to do a little bit of world building.
Ooh.
So thinking about a setting for either yourself or a character or some brand new character you come up with, if you could paint a picture of the perfect place to enjoy this drink, ooh, what would that be like? What would that scene feel like? What would you be doing? What would you be seeing and smelling and everything?
Oh, it would be like one of the places it would either be Machu Picchu or somewhere in Iceland. And it would be, if it were somewhere in Iceland, my character would have just triumphed over some or other obstacle and kind of be not so much relaxing, but kind of relishing the victory and the moment and savoring sort of the contrasting scenery in Iceland with the very dark shades from all the volcanic sand, but also, the fact that there's so many places in Iceland which are untouched by man. So that would be something which kind of connects to the drink, because the drink is, fully organic and healthy and, connects to nature. So if it was the Iceland scene, that's what my character would be doing. If it was in the Machu Picchu scene, I think my character would be on a journey of self-discovery, but also on a journey of testing personal limits, both physically and mentally. And so they'd be pretty active doing stuff there. And I think the drink would just kind of be a tool in helping them, achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve as they test themselves and push themselves.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah. That's awesome. I've never been to either place. They're definitely high on my list. Have you been?
I have never been to either. They're high on my list, but yeah. Yeah,
I've it's one of those some days. It's like the stars will align and I will get there.
But. Yes, the stars will align. Yeah.
So coming back to the topic of process, what do you think was the most challenging aspect of the publication process for you?
Marketing.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you on that.
Because I feel like a big part of you is like, oh, it's done. And now I don't have to do anything. It's out in the world and it will, go out and live its own life. But it doesn't really live its own life. Its life is dependent on you sort of breathing life into it constantly. And I think, I don't know about all writers, but I know a lot of writers, certainly me, I write because I don't have to be in front of people talking and doing things. And so the idea of having to put my face in front of people constantly to talk about my book is, not up there as one of my favorite things to do. And also following up with people But I think also a lot of mistakes or like assumptions I had about how marketing the book works was extremely challenging. I know, like for my first book, I had all these like author copies sent to me, and then I was like, okay, well, I'll just go drop them off in like libraries, and people will get back to me. And that doesn't work like that. Like you drop it off in a library and be like, thanks. Yeah, and that's it.
I find it's with marketing, it's such a there's such a tightrope to walk as a self-published author, because when you're traditionally published and someone else is doing at least that initial marketing for you, they can cheerlead all they want. And it's not you, it's just a marketing person doing the marketing, and it feels totally normal. But when you're doing it yourself and cheerleading for yourself, it's that line between promoting and begging, basically, and knowing kind of where on that line you fall is so tricky. I know I struggle with that a lot.
Yeah, it's true. I think you say it perfectly when it's like the thin line between promoting and begging. Yeah, and I find the thing that I don't do the begging anymore. I kind of am like, well, this is what I can offer you in value. Like I have these various other avenues where I could also provide you with visibility, and that's what you would be getting from me in return for you kind of giving my book some airtime or space or whatever on your platform. And I think that has been one of the ways that has worked best. But also, I think something which I'm not really comfortable tapping into, but like, your network. Like I said, networking isn't my forte, but the network has worked really well too, because people want to support you and want to share your vision and your book and your story. And I, in the beginning, I really underestimated the power that has.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so then let's flip things on its head. What has been the most rewarding aspect of the publication process for you?
The most rewarding, I think, seeing something through, because I feel like, especially as writers in the writing as a field itself is pretty saturated, and you can get really dejected and be like, well, what's the point? And so seeing it through from start to finish was really rewarding. But also I recently got a postcard from somebody in New York who said to me, it's on my fridge too, where they said they really enjoyed reading the book, and it meant a lot to them because they were previously in a situation like my character in the book was, and they really could relate, and they really appreciated reading. I think that was the most rewarding thing for me. And when I go to lunch again, I went to lunch with somebody about 3 weeks ago, and she said, "Oh, I lent my copy to a friend, because they are in this situation, and I just thought, if they can just read this, then they'll hold on." And that was extremely rewarding and made it completely worth it. And I'll definitely keep doing it.
Nice. Okay, so what are some of the biggest lessons that you feel like you've learned in the process, and then attached to that for your next books, whatever your future is holding writing-wise, how do you think your approach will change, if it changes, or will it stay the same?
I definitely don't think it'll stay the same. I'll definitely be more organized now that I've been through it, and I know kind of what some of the pitfalls are. It's definitely gonna be like a more organized and well-oiled machine next time around. And I think another big lesson I've learned from it, I think, is also kind of the value of the work. Like when you talked about the line between begging, I think there's kind of this idea that like if you publish yourself, it doesn't have as much value as if you're traditionally published. And I find that that's just absolutely not true. And I think like knowing that definitely will change the way in which I do things moving forward. And then, yeah, like I said, definitely like changing the way I go about the marketing aspect of it and where I make the book available will also definitely change. I think something I didn't do this time around was audiobook available, which is a bit hypocritical of me because I had a baby 4.5 years ago, and after that I couldn't read with my eyes anymore because where was the time? So my reading habits changed and I became like an avid Audible listener. But I didn't put any of my books in Audible form. So I think that's maybe something that I'm researching and looking into moving forward, because a lot of people reading habits are kind of a melange of, reading one book, you're listening to an audiobook here, you maybe have an ebook that you're reading on your commute. So I think that would be another change. And I think also maybe just like in the promotion, I might also include things like book stubs and QR codes as opposed to just the traditional back for you. Just, because of that younger generation that I talked about, whose like consumer habits are very like different to my. I mean, I'm not like that old, but like already there's a huge difference in the way they consume media than what I consider as normal or regular. Yeah.
So thinking back to the last version of your process with the Glitter Horn, your last book, are there any specific things that you would warn new authors about? Like, hey, don't do this, or, watch out. Like, I know for me, I had certain things where it's like, oh, I am never, ever doing that again. So was there anything like that where you'd want to kind of throw a warning sign up for other writers?
I would say the proofs, because I printed so many of these proofs, and total waste because afterwards you can't do anything with them because of the ban. But also you just don't need them. I think I would do away with the proofs. Too many of them anyway. I'd probably only print just the one. But I mean, you get the same thing if you get an author copy. Like, you can go through and do all the editing, correcting, whatever in the author copy. So that's one thing I wouldn't do also because printing paper and ink and stuff is bad for the planet if you're not going to need them. So that's one thing I wouldn't do. What's the other thing I wouldn't do? I think I would choose differently the kind of promotion avenues. Because I think this time around, I just kind of contacted, the stereotypical, this is what I think would work, and this is who I think would be interested. And I think I would be more thoughtful about that process, about choosing who to direct my work to. For promotion purposes. So I definitely do that differently. What's another thing I'd do differently? I think also like with the layout, like I said, it was really like simple and stuff and easy, but I think in the beginning also I wasn't very, because I was like, oh, it works so well. I wasn't super attentive to some things that I should have been attentive to. And some of those things could have been eliminated if I just kind of had relied a bit more on myself and less on the software. I could have kind of eliminated the need for some revision if I had, paid more attention. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would not be doing again.
Nice. Okay, let's flip that on its head then. What are some tips or tricks or suggestions that you have for people who are about to set off on their publishing journey where, you know, it's the stuff that you've discovered where you're like, yes, that is great. I'm always going to do it this way. You know, what are some of those successes that you've had?
I think it would be to have your beta readers. What I did was I had, 3 different beta readers, and they, marked up 3 different texts for me. And then now I was sat with 3 different texts and having to like do each one individually and look. And I discovered later on, like, I could just put this one text in the drive and everybody could mark up the same text. And then I don't have to like at the end sit with like different forms of the text and figure out how to like amalgamate the 3. And so, yeah, so that's a tip. If you can get everybody to work on the same document or give their feedback on the same document, that makes things simpler for you or more streamlined for you. The other tip is an age-old tip: revise. Put it away for a bit so that your eyes are, not familiar with it for a little while, and come back to it and like see it with new eyes. I think is a big one, because on one of my print rounds, I realized that at the back on the cover, like I said, there are placeholders for the back of the cover. So one of the placeholders for text says add text here. And so I had put my blurb in there, and it still said after the blurb, add text here. I was like, oh. So yeah, put it away for a bit and then come back and look at it again with fresh eyes. The last tip I would say, I think, is maybe just like if you're having trouble. I struggled with a lot of like fear of how will this be received. I probably shouldn't be talking about this because what if it's not well received? And I think a big tip for that was imagining that I was doing this work for someone else. Because if it was for somebody else, I wouldn't have a problem like, championing it and like trumpeting the story and the cause for someone else. So just, if you struggle with that, with the imposter syndrome, just imagine that like you're doing it for a client and you're advocating for a client, and you advocate for yourself as hard as you would for your client. That is a really great tip. I like that a lot. Just kind of stepping outside of yourself for a sec with that. I really like that. I'm gonna use that. Yeah. All right, Tendayi, it is last call here at the Indie Pub. Can you give us an indie published book or 2 or 3 that you want more people to check out? There's a author called Maressa Mortimer, and she's a Dutch writer. She's based in the UK though, and she wrote a book called Beyond the Hills, and it's like it's part of a series, the Lobby series, and I highly recommend that, because she had done something that I'd never seen, because the trials that the main protagonist faces are very subtle, even though the havoc and the gravity of their effects on her life are actually pretty immense. But she does it in such a way that it's very subtle, but you still feel a lot of the tension and a lot of the suffering through very, very small increments. So it's a story about perseverance and kind of warring with yourself between doing the right thing or doing the thing that will keep me comfortable and enable me to uphold my place in society. So I really recommend that book. Another book series I recommend is by a French author called Audrey Marine-Peche. And she wrote a book series called Talam. And I read The Anya's Quest. And what I liked about that book is that she wrote a book where it's like a periodic piece, which also has like magic entwined in there, but her hero suffers from hemophilia. So like the thing that makes him strong also makes him sick. And I thought that was really, really interesting. First of all, I had never actually read a book where the hero had like a disease, an incurable disease. But, the hemophilia is only brought on by his use of his magic. So I thought that was very, very clever, and also kind of walking this tightrope of power and weakness and what that really means. So those are my two indie picks.
Okay, so same question, but for any other media, indie or not.
For any other media, so I really enjoyed a book last year called Son of the Storm by Suyi Davies. I hope I pronounced the surname correctly, Okungbowa. Wow, what a book. I love like magic and fantasy and stuff, but it's a book that is set in sort of a pre-colonial Africa. And so it's looking at like the cultures and the spiritual structure, and it really is like the world building that he's done there is incredible, and the story is incredible. And I remember like when I was reading it, I said to my partner, my mom, I was like, I really resonate with this character. I like her a lot. And as I kept reading, I was like, you know what? Actually, I think she might be a sociopath, and I'm concerned that I resonate with her, and later on I was like, no guys, she's definitely a sociopath. But it was really like it was really like a really, really epic story, and it also kind of ties in this idea of like African mythology, while still working within the general tropes of fantasy. It's really good, very good book, highly recommended. And it's a series, so there's another one coming out this year, I think. And then the other one is a kiddies book, because like I mentioned that I have a daughter 4.5-ish, like 8 months, and a friend of mine every year she sends me a book from this series, and the author is Nathan Bryan, and it's a series about a little girl called Rocket, and she is always doing like wonderful things. So like in the first book, it's called Look Up, and she lives with her mom and her older brother, and she's very interested in the stars and astronauts and things. And so she tells the people in her nation, she creates like flyers, and she gets people to come out to see like this meteor shower. And then in the second book, she goes with her mom and her brother to visit her mom's parents, who I presume are from Jamaica. And then her grandparents, they're telling her about how all this plastic and like consumption of plastic and then littering and things is like damaging the ecosystem, and like the whales haven't been seen in a while, and so she organizes this like beach cleanup crew because we need to do something for our environment, for our future, for the animals. And I think it's really great because it's tackling like real world issues, but it's also teaching our kids to like be conscious of that and like going forward. So that's one that I really like. Yeah. All
right. So tell our listeners what it is you have going on right now and where they can find you and your work.
Going on right now, I received my edited copy of the sequel to my book Narinhi. So that's something that I will be birthing later this year.
Congrats.
Thank you. But then I'm also writing the sequel to the Glitter Horn. So that's been really fun. I'm really enjoying that, and it focuses on the sister of the main character in the Glitter Horn, and it's mainly set in an African city, like a cosmopolitan African city, and so I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing how that will be received. I remember I brought a couple of chapters into writers group, and they were like, "Where is this?" Because it kind of feels like it could be anywhere, and like we can relate. And I was like, "That's the point. If that's how you feel, then it's doing its job." So yeah, I'm excited about that. And that's what those will be my two main projects this year. And people can find my work at my website, www.tendaichirawu.com. But my books are available. I mean, Narinhi is available on all book selling places. So it's at Barnes & Noble, it's at Amazon, obviously, it's at Kindle, all book selling places. And I've mentioned only like 3 places. But like, and the Glitter Horn, it's available in all those places on Fnac. Yeah, they're all Goodreads. All the places where you find books, you can get a copy. So in those 2 formats, which is paperback and ebook. So, and then I'm quite active on Instagram as well. So you can find me at Tendayi_Olga on Instagram.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Indie Pub. If you like what you hear, consider giving us a like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our indie investigations or boozy banter. I've been your host, Jay Rushing, and we'll see you back in the pub next time.